Hi, EasyStepUK. My name is Tristan. Thank you for progressing me through your application process. And these are my answers to the Local Ideas for Lasting Change questionnaire. To answer the first question, the community I'd like to talk about is my household. I live with 4 other students from the University of Reading, and the unique feature of this little community is that we are all vegetarian on a Monday. We call it Meatless Monday. The kind of reason for that is the environmental benefits, and that's kind of what we all agree on, but there's also animal cruelty factors in there as well. And it started as just kind of the household and has now grown legs, and it's why I say that it could become the kind of starting point for a local change, because we now have a text chain which involves 14 people in comparison to the 5 it started with, that all are also now vegetarian on a Monday. And sort of the idea behind it is none of us, although we can all agree that in an ideal world it might be great to, none of us were kind of wanted to commit to being fully vegetarian. But if you kind of have 7 people that go vegetarian for 1 day a week, it's almost as though you have another vegetarian in the friendship group. For the second question, I think I'm quite consistently part of joint decision-making processes. I sit as a core committee member on a sports society at the University of Reading, the core committee being the president, secretary, treasurer, and myself, who is the welfare and EDI representative. A kind of concrete change that we created was the creation of kind of families where freshers or first years were kids, second years were adults, third years were sort of grandparents, and fourth years or master students were ghosts, was the joke. The idea here is it kind of created a really easy access person for first years to talk to people who have gone through what they were currently going through, and it meant that both integration and access to experience was a lot easier for new members of the society. So question 3, growing up in an Asian household, kind of senior members that I was introduced to through my parents were always aunties and uncles. And the kind of the story of kind of community collaboration I'd like to talk about is actually a little bit sad, but one of my mum's friends, my auntie's husband, passed away 3 years ago. And it was really interesting to be a part, to both see and be a part of kind of how the community of my mum's friends and all my aunties kind of came together to help organise his funeral. He died quite suddenly, and as a result, she went through quite a dramatic period of grief, and the concept of kind of organising the funeral became really difficult, but that entire kind of community of people came together, and it created a really nice kind of event for her, because whereas they could have kind of outsourced to kind of a catering company to organise the food for the funeral, instead it became more of those who could kind of cook and bring things did so, and it created a sort of culturally comforting environment for someone that was going through a really tough time. For question 4, I think consistent changing of leadership is actually quite important for the long-term resilience of a community. It brings in new ideas, but also means that the community doesn't become reliant on a single particular individual and kind of can outlive and survive them. But I think that a period of kind of passing on the baton, or a mentoring period, is actually quite important to kind of create that smooth transition and make sure that there's no sort of dramatic and sudden changes which occur, which kind of rock the boat for the whole community because the leader has changed. So I think for question 5, there are kind of the 2 sides. Firstly, to embed fairness, I think it's really important that there's accessibility for disabled people and no barriers which stop those that are kind of not conventionally abled from partaking in community activity. And then when it comes to inclusion, I think that cultural sensitivity is really important to ensure minorities feel comfortable in unfamiliar spaces. A story I talk about is so I work as a rink steward part-time at the local ice rink over Christmas, and a few weeks ago a man and his wife were at the ice rink, and they were both quite inexperienced when it came to ice skating, and he asked me if I could hold his hand and guide him around the ice rink, and I was able to do so. And afterwards he asked if my colleague could help his wife. Now she was wearing a hijab, and in that moment I clocked on to the possibility that I as a man they may not be comfortable for I as a man to hold her hand and guide her around because of Islamic culture. And so I was quite happy about the fact that we were able to create an environment there where they were able to be included, because my colleague, who was a woman, was able to kind of hold her hand and guide her around in a situation that they were possibly more comfortable with. So I think a really important practical mechanism of having young people's voices heard is that they need to be encouraged to attend meetings with their local MP, or sort of town councils. I think it's really important young people don't see their local MP as this sort of distant member of government, and they see them more as this person that is contactable for ideas and changes. Next, I think it's important young people are sort of encouraged to use their schools or kind of as channels of how to have their kind of voices heard. And because there are just so many young people in these institutions, they're kind of really productive ways to enact local change. And I think it's when I think schools can have some of the biggest impacts on their local communities through the ideas and passions that are there. And that sort of links into my third change, because I kind of like to answer question 9 about a creative idea that combines community, art and the environment. I think the young people are really passionate about climate change at the moment, and within my university institution there's a big point made of the climate stripes, which is sort of a visualization of how the global average temperature has changed over the last century, and it's gotten warmer. And I think it'd be a really interesting creative idea to kind of start to create that conversation between higher education institutions and how they're visualizing things like climate change, and get that into sort of youth community and art groups, and try and make sure that that story really gets out there, and sort of people in the local area are made aware of what's going on and what young people are passionate about.